I'm your host, Kay. Jay is off today, probably backsliding somewhere, but that's another story. Today, we are absolutely excited. I'm going to tell you why. We have everyone's favorite auntie in the building, Maggie, the substitute teacher. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, awesome. That's certainly our pleasure. There's so much to talk about. There's so much content kind of going around. You being an influencer, but I know you've had some appearances and some things on some other shows, and some of the comments and quotes and things where folks are stitching and playing back and so on. So we're going to take some time to touch on that and really kind of unpack some of those things and kind of get your perspective on a couple of things. But before I dig deep into that, um, your content, which we
Hmm.
certainly do love, is in that culinary space, right?
Right.
And
Hmm.
so, and I think it's interesting because we have our editorial meetings on the J and K show, and we talk about all of our guests and folks who we're scheduled to bring on. And so we said, hey, when we started talking about you, we said, hey, how would you describe Maggie, the substitute teacher? And someone said, uh, social media influencer who advocates for good marriage and really good home cooking.
I love that.
Is that a fair description?
I think so. I always just say I'm a mom on the internet with a struggle cooking channel. Sometimes I ask myself, how did I get here? I go viral on accident. But yes, I do love to cook and feed others.
Yeah, and going viral by accident is absolutely the perfect way to do it. So let's stay here for a minute on that culinary piece. Listen, we all eat, we all enjoy it. Um, how did your love for cooking, where did that journey take us through that?
Oh, goodness. So I come from a traditional nuclear African family. We're immigrants coming to the US when I was one. So my parents came for education, and my mom, both of my parents have doctorates, but my mom's focus was in, we used to call it home economics. I think they call it family and consumer sciences. So I just grew up with my mom as the example, and we would have, whether it was school or work activities, we would eat together as a family every day. So for me, that was just normal. And then growing up with those chores and being told, Maggie, in the kitchen, who's going to cook for your children if you don't cook for them? I was playing with Barbie, so I didn't get it at the time. And so fast forward, when I got married after college and, started doing what was demonstrated to me. That's kind of how it began. But like a lot of people, I do love to eat. And it doesn't always love me back. And so I have struggled with my weight, especially now. I turned 50 last year. And for a lot of us, you just have to start doing things differently when you mature. So I went to a metabolic specialist and got tested for food sensitivity. So I have a list of foods that I can eat and foods that don't really agree with me. So I just started using that culinary, if you will, expertise, trying to recreate food that I wanted to eat with the ingredients that I have to eat. And it just started in my kitchen. I would cook privately and then I would post, this is what I'm eating today, just the final plate. And people started asking questions. Oh, did you make that? How did you make it? Where did you get the ingredients? And I was just going back and forth in the comments, and then decided to turn on the camera and go live and show people what I'm doing. And that's how it all began.
Oh, that's an incredible story. I'm going to lean in on that
Mhm.
a little bit. But before I do that, when you were talking about your family and your parents, your voice changed and you kind of stuck in a little accent in there. I didn't catch it. Where are your folks from?
Oh, I'm sorry if I didn't say I was born in Ghana in West Africa, and I'll be going home for the holidays. I try to go home every year between Christmas and New Year's. It's a
Oh, that is
beautiful,
awesome.
yeah, tropical country. So yeah, very much proud Ghanaian American.
Yeah, no, that's great. I did one of those genealogy kind of profile things, and
Yeah.
a big old percentage of my folks come from Ghana, as I'm
Hmm.
sure many African Americans here where their lineage goes back to that part of the world. So we could be
Absolutely.
cousins. Who
Yeah,
knows?
I think we're
But
all family.
yeah. So going back to what you were saying, how your um, diet habits changed. I guess you can say somewhat medically driven, health and wellness driven. It
Mhm.
was this a case of, hey, I'm going to make separate meals, one for me and then one for the family?
Yeah.
Or is it kind of, listen, I'm preparing the meals, you all eat what I eat?
No. That's not what you do. I still cook. I'm a boy mom. The two boys, 16 and 18. I'm a long-term relationship, post-divorce, and I just don't think it's right that we force other people to eat what we eat. This really started with me cooking for the family. I cooked the regular last night, pancakes, bacon, eggs, all the stuff that growing boys and men can eat or want to eat. And then I tried to make substitute versions of those things that I can eat. So I still cook all the home, what do you call it? The home cooked like comfort foods, but I will either eat in advance my food and then cook for them so that I'm not nibbling as much on their food, or I will make a substitute version just for myself. But no, that's not what we do. We don't subject others to our journeys.
Yeah. So I think it's a perfect segue you talking about husband and your sons and this family dynamic. We talked a little bit about some of that content that you have going viral, and it's kind of in that same space, family and so
Mhm.
on. In a very broad sense, how would you describe the state of familyhood, if there's such a word, in America today, or overall, for that matter?
Well, goodness, I try to focus on our community. Honestly, I'm not too concerned about what other people do, but for our community, it's in a crisis right now. And I always say, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. But if you do want the macro view, I talked to Mr. President, who's my man. I learned so much from him, but it really opened my eyes to what's happening in other countries. For example, I believe it's Japan that now sells more adult diapers than they do children's diapers. And for me, that's horrifying. As we get older, we really start thinking about the legacy and what's going to be left behind when we're gone. And we were raised Gen Xers, and I think it was pretty understood that you would marry and have a family of your own. Not everybody, I know, not all, not all, not all. But when we have focused on it's all about me, we see what's happening in other cultures and then how that's bleeding into our community. That's why I'm very um, determined to help the young women, especially who can. Um, make better choices and have the opportunity if that's what they want. Like I said, I know it's not for everybody, but I think the next few years, there's going to be a lot of weeping and gnashing of teeth, but not all hope is lost. I think for the ones that want to, they can course correct right now. And that's where I pour all of my energy because we see it all over the place. People are thinking that they can do whatever they want. And then when they're ready, all those options will be available to them. And that's not the truth. Time waits for no one. And we're seeing the effects of that right now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And when you talk that comment about doing whatever you want,
Hmm.
and so does that kind of lean into maybe a little bit of behaviors and the behaviors that you're seeing young folks, men and women, and then expecting there to be no toll on their lives or the decisions or what's available to them by partners or potential partners. Is that kind of what it's correlating to, the comment that you made?
Yes. And again, I focus on young women for a couple of reasons. I don't feel like I have a place to speak to men. I'm a boy mom. There's a lot of men in my family, but obviously I haven't had the man experience, so I don't want to speak out of turn. And then secondly, I identify with a lot of young, modern, headstrong women. I was that go-getter, we didn't have the term boss babe, but focused on corporate. I was able to do both at the same time, but I didn't keep the main thing, and it did cost me my marriage. So second time around, I've learned, and that's where I speak from my own lived experience, However, to answer your question, yes, I think one of the big differences for me is because of the way that I was raised and the example that my parents gave me, I embrace something called delayed gratification. And you don't see that now with a lot of young people, women especially. I watched my parents leave their home country, leave everything that was familiar to come to a new land and work. I mean, my dad worked at the Piggly Wiggly grocery store. My mom cut up vegetables at Ryan's Steakhouse. They took turns going to school because they could only afford one semester at a time because out of state tuition is three times the cost. And being immigrants, we don't qualify, nor should we qualify for any assistance. So that was my example growing up. Now my parents are comfortably retired. They have a country club home and a luxury car, if you will, but it wasn't always that way. And so I knew I wasn't going to get the finer things of life in the beginning. And I accepted that. Now that the boys are up and out, we have one that's a Marine and then one that's a graduating senior. Now it's my time to enjoy and travel and have some of those nicer things, but you have to earn that. So coming back to what you asked as far as relationships, I do see young women now thinking that going for, I want to travel to every continent, or I want to be flued out, or I want to take my time, I want to build a business, I want to do all those things. That's great, but it's going to cost you something. And then when you're good and ready, like I said before, the options that you thought would always be there, they're not waiting for you.
Yeah. So where's the disconnect? Where'd that disconnect come from? You referenced your parents, and based on your age, so I'm going to say parents are in the baby boomer generation.
Hmm.
They have Maggie, which is in this Gen X space, and
Yeah.
so it's only two generations away, right?
Hmm.
Where young folks today had an opportunity to see their parents and their grandparents with this certain ideology, if you will, in terms of how they work and their approach to this, as you said, delayed gratification. But yet, so many cases, they don't seem to embody those same values. Where's the disconnect? How did that occur?
Well, I do believe that everything starts in the home, and I'm just going to say it. We don't have the type of child rearing that produces the adults that we all admire and respect. I don't think there's anything extraordinary about me. I think what has happened, to answer your question, parents have in mass kind of given up on really raising their children and just letting them figure it out. That's one. Of course, low-hanging fruit, we have social media, but the impact of social media is when you grow up in a small town, small college town like I did, what you know is what's around you. And so you are shaped by your environment. Our environment wasn't the world growing up. I remember an old show called Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, right? Well, we would watch those people that had the yachts or whatever over there. And it was that moment, or MTV Awards, you would see your favorite celebrity do a performance, and that was it. You turn that off and you go back to the real world. Now, for a lot of young people, they think the real world is everything, and that's just not realistic. I don't think it's helping us. It's almost like having too much choice. So I think that's an impact of social media. And then I think the biggest thing for me, and I'm all for technology, I work in tech, but life really is too easy, meaning we chose to be in relationships in the past. A big part of it was necessity. Now, I'm not saying that, all of the advances have hurt us and we need to go back to doing things manual. But for someone like me who does like to travel, when you go to other countries, it is very clear that a man is a man and a woman is a woman. But when you go to first world countries and we have all these advancements, that's where you hear women saying, oh, I don't need a man, or I can pick up the phone, or I have this device, or I can do whatever. But when war is a real threat, Hunger is a real threat. Crime is a real threat. And I'm not advocating for that. But look, even in our community, when things get difficult, you see people looking left and right, like, how can I couple up and not do this thing alone? But it's not going to happen on your time. You have to prepare for that.
Yeah, so it sounds like I'm hearing you say that there is a need for recalibration right now. Do you
Yeah.
think um, do you think women are maybe expecting or looking for too much or too many boxes to be checked and in the space of fulfillment from financially, emotionally, men looking for men to assist in their personal growth? Is that kind of where it is that you see the greatest portion of that disconnect, that the role of that male partner has somehow transformed into a different definition for women?
Yes, but so to answer your question, yes, I think our expectations are astronomical and it's not real. That's why they're not being met. And a lot of women are unsatisfied. And what I realize when I talk to women, especially when they get to my age and they not have not found a relationship, it is now that they're pining for the opportunities of the past when that nice guy or that good guy gave them a chance, but they thought they could do better than him. I'm a big fan of Psych Hacks, Dr. Orion Taraban, and he has a channel as well. He had said something once that really struck with me, and he said a lot of relationships fail, and I am no psychologist, but he said a lot of relationships fail because we expect too much from each other. Meaning, not only are you supposed to be my husband, you're supposed to be my best friend, my brunch buddy, my therapist, my workout partner, all of that. And we have lost that a husband is a role, a man is a man. He's not your bestie. And a woman is a woman. We are not equal. We are equal in value, but we are very different. And a wife is a role. And I think the example that we had at home growing up, we saw that polarity, if you will, in the masculine and the feminine. And now, like I said, with all of this modern conveniences, and we're just becoming like carbon copies of everything, there's no duality there. And so you think that somebody who is made to lead can also be your emotional comfort, or a woman who is best at nurturing is supposed to burn the candle at both ends until her body breaks down. So, yes, I do think our expectations are out of order, but I think that, like I said, we can turn it around, but we have to be intentional about it.
Right. Some women have talked about in the space of high body counts, multiple partners, they talked about increasing sexual compatibility by having more experience, thus making them better partners for their future husbands and so on. But you've had some pretty stern counter comments to the idea of taking that approach, and then moreover, what the effects of that can mean to a young lady and how she's also perceived. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, good luck with that. I mean, you can do what you want to do. I'm just so, let's talk about sex, shall we? I think that you can have as much sex and do all the things that you want to do with your husband and be just as fulfilled, and have fun with each other. That's how it was meant to be. This I struggle to even call it logic. This logic about having more sexual experiences makes you a better partner, which I don't really care for the word partner because it assumes that we are equal, but I understand. It doesn't make you a better woman to the man that you actually want. It's actually disgusting. Now, look, again, you can do whatever you want to, but when men choose us for life, they're not choosing us because we're going to knock their socks off. I think one of the beautiful things about being in a relationship is growing together and exploring each other and finding out what you like, what he likes, and it becomes special. If you ask most men, especially men who have options like Mr. President, he'll tell you it's all the same. What makes it different is the emotional connection and how I feel about this woman. So you all are out here just practicing and it's not helping you get the outcome that you want. Because if that were the case, then every OF model or every corn star would be snatched up left and right. The opposite is true. What we're seeing is these women who have been in the sex work usually are ashamed of it. They try to scrub their image. They come online regretting, talking about how not all, not all, not all, but usually they tire of that. And then now want someone to take them serious. And a man is like, you've been available to everybody. What's special about that? I'm not saying you need to be a prude. I do have some students who are saving themselves towards marriage, and I think that's great. I believe in young marriage, but I don't agree with that at all. And I would just say, look at the women that have lived those lives. They're all, because of social media, we have access to it. Something tells me when they get my age, they're trying to rewrite history and now show up as a different version of themselves when you could have been that all along and had those secrets just between the two of you of all the fun things that you did together.
Right. You mentioned that you are a boy mom,
Yes.
and so there's a topic. It isn't necessarily new, but it's certainly one which people talk often about in the dating space. And so, from a courting standpoint for men, um, there's this 50-50 kind of approach or this privileged, pampered privileged. I don't know if that's necessarily the counter, but somewhere thereabouts. And so right out of the chute, right out of the gate, women are suggesting that they're not interested in the 50-50, that the first date should be dinner, steakhouse, things of that nature. And some men are pushing back on that. And the debate goes either way, goes certainly either way. I don't know if there's a right or wrong to this, but what's your opinion on that from looking at it from a male's perspective? When he is approaching a woman and he has affection for her, should he lean in with this kind of 50-50 approach? We're splitting this bill on the first date. Or is this more kind of traditional to where, hey, this one's on me, but it's also wherever I decide that we go?
Okay. Um, this is a new concept to me, but I understand. First things first, this whole 50-50 concept, it's a delayed or a lagging indicator to where men are now tired of being used for their resources.
Mm,
That's how we got here. Before all of this mess, I thought, I think that men thought of courting a woman as knowing and understanding and expecting to, if I'm asking you to spend time with you, you're genuinely interested in me, I would love to take you out. I would love to take you somewhere nice. Now, again, like you asked me before about these unrealistic expectations, I think the women are expecting anniversary treatment on the first date, which is ridiculous. These comments about Cheesecake Factory is beneath me and all of these things. I'm in a relationship with a very well-to-do man, and our first date was at Chick-fil-A. And I look back on it lovingly. Now things are very different. But the point is, and this is what I tell ladies, the purpose of dating is to determine if this is a suitable match for marriage or long term. It is not to go to a restaurant that you can't afford by yourself. It is not to get dressed up and take pictures for the gram and stunt on people. It is not because you're bored and you have nothing else to do. Those are the women that have driven men to the point where they're like, you know what, I'm not doing anything until you prove yourself. So unfortunately, all of us have to pay the price for that behavior. But if you are genuinely interested in a man, you will go out for ice cream. You will go out for Chick-fil-A. You will take a walk in the park. if you're trying to determine if we are compatible for marriage and long term, because you know that all of those good things will come. And that's what women have to understand. It's natural for a man to be able and to want to do that for his woman, not all women. So you have to earn that. You are not entitled to a lifestyle. You are not entitled to his resources. So, to answer the question, again, I don't speak for men, but at the Chick-fil-A, I brought my wallet because, just thinking, okay, I should be prepared to. And he told me, what are you doing? Put your wallet away. And that showed me, okay, wherever we are, whatever we're doing, he's going to cover it. Now, if he asks me for Chick-fil-A, if I want to be with him, we're going to Chick-fil-A. That turns into, Valentine's Day could be a $700 dinner, but you don't get that in the beginning. You don't get that until you have proven yourself. So to answer your question, I think men should, if I may, provide at the level that they are comfortable with. Now, again, this only applies if we're really courting for real relationship. All that other fun stuff that people are doing, I don't know how any of that works, so I can't answer that.
Right. Being inside of a relationship, a loving relationship, a sustained relationship,
Mhm.
where is it best to be rooted in? Is it shared political ideology? Is it in a spiritual theology and dogma that you both follow? Is it through counseling? If you had to plant one flag in the ground to say, "Hey, we're going to use this as the foundation for our relationship," where do you see this should be based off of those options?
Great question. I think it's shared goals and values. Um, when you ask about politics, I don't know how my man votes. We talk about
Really?
politics on both sides, but what he told me is it doesn't matter who's in office. Our job is to make sure that we create a life that doesn't sway by whoever is in office. So we shouldn't be bothered by that. You see people howling at the moon, yelling at each other. What has it done? You're still in the same position you were in when the other person was in office. As far as, dogma or faith, I am a Christian. My man is a Christian. I do believe that the scripture says, don't be unequally yoked. And I do believe that it is much better if you both have the same faith. Is it impossible? No, people from different faiths or no faiths get together all the time. But I'm going to say it, that's not enough. You can both be Christian and both be horrible for each other. So that's why I say goals and values. Now, when we attach ourselves to someone in relationship, there is a purpose behind that. We're not just bored and getting together. I believe that we both make each other better. And from a man's perspective, since you asked me, what I have seen is a man will go as far as he can on his own, accomplishing his goals until he gets to the point in life where he either wants or needs, which is a want, a woman to go to the next place in life with him. So we need to be understanding where that man is going. And does that align with what we are able to add value to? I think my man told me, a farmer is looking for a farmer's wife. A trucker is looking for a trucker's wife. A politician is looking for a politician's wife. A doctor is looking for a doctor's wife, meaning you have to understand. Well, the man has to have a vision on his own. Again, men need to figure that out. That's not for me. But I need to be able to look at that man and say, okay, can I see where he's going? Does his life play out in a way that supports what he's actually doing, not just talking about it? And then can I see myself in his life? I'll give you an example. I know this about myself. I like structure, and it's almost like a security blanket for me. So it probably would be very hard for me to be in a relationship with someone who was maybe like a police officer or firefighter or ER doctor or traveled a lot or wasn't home or even military. It takes a very strong woman to be able to carry a lot of that on her own. And I know myself well enough to not make it hard for myself and make it hard for that potential man. So you have to have that clarity and the goals and the vision and what he's trying to build, what you all are trying to build together has to be aligned, I would say, over anything else.
Well, I think that's great. I refer to you as the internet's favorite auntie. Do you get folks reaching out to you for advice and saying, "Hey, how, why," and so on? In general, what's trending? If you had to kind of handicap the number of messages and inquiries that you receive, where does it seem like the overall questions are kind of sourcing from or leading to?
Interesting question. It depends on the asker. I would break it into three groups. We'll do a bell curve. So let's say the smallest 25% are my young ladies that are either married or saving themselves for marriage. I would say in their 20s, they didn't have the example and the upbringing that I did, but something about them knew that they wanted to have a family of their own and they're just trying to figure it out. They don't really have the guidance. And so they're kind of like, okay, Miss Maggie, this is what's going on. And I pour into them because that's who's going to get us out of this. So I have those women and they may have questions about how to communicate better with their husband. They may have questions about, you know, some of maybe a disagreement, how to better address something, maybe getting some feedback from their husband that was very direct and it kind of stung a little bit. And, they're not trying to blow up anything, but just kind of helping them through being a good wife because that's what they want to be. Well, we'll go to the other 25%. The other 25%, surprisingly, as much as I say I don't feel like I have a place to speak to men, I do have men reach out for questions. And I always run everything by Mr. President, like I told you, even asking him to be on here. He's very protective of my brand. But sometimes men will reach out for the same type of question. But what I'm realizing is they didn't have, dare I say, good mothers, or they didn't have someone with a certain softness to kind of tell them the truth in a way that is helpful.
Mm.
And so the questions that I get from men, usually they're in a relationship with a woman and they are literally like one foot out the door. And they have a laundry list of things that they've asked her to do. She's not responding well. She's deflecting. I really want this to work, but they're usually at their wits' end. And, ladies, here's a hint and a half for you. Men put up with a lot and don't say anything about it. So I always tell my students by the time a man is saying something about it, it has been a problem. So don't blow by that. If your man gives you feedback and this is a good one and you want to hold on to him, because if not, why are you there? But usually they're coming to me, I'll say as a last resort, and I shoot them straight. And the last one that just reached out to me, I told him, she doesn't respect you. This is clear. You've given her feedback. Whatever you have asked her to do, um, she's trying to treat you like one of her subordinates at work. And that's not going to work long term. So usually by the time the men reach out to me, it's some type of confirmation of what they've already been feeling, but they just wanted it from somebody like me. The biggest part of the bell curve, unfortunately, is older women. And by older, I mean 30 to 70. And I know women are going to be howling at the moon, but like the late great Kevin Samuels used to say, once you hit 30, you are old for marriage. I was married at 25, and I always say I feel like I beat the buzzer because I remember not wanting to be closer to 30 than I was 20. And I married my college boyfriend. I'd been with him since I was 18. We grew up in a time when it was not uncommon to marry your high school or college sweetheart. Then you all build a life together and you get to this point and you can travel and you can do everything. But I've had women, like I said, from 30 all the way up to 70 and every age in between. with some version of, I want what you have. How can I have that?
Mhm.
Unfortunately for them, not all, but the ship has sailed. Because you have to realize to have this type of life at this age, 15 years ago, you were building. So
Right.
when you see somebody that's living the life that you want, it's not about asking, how can you know, time travel to get in the front of the line. It's really learning, okay, how did I get here? What mistakes did I make? But I'll be honest with you, I've really pulled back from that group because in order to get to that point, there's a lot of self-reflection that was missed. And what I didn't like was the time that it spent to unravel the truth from women who had plenty of opportunities, messed up those opportunities, but it was always someone else's fault. And unfortunately, like I said, time waits for no one. Are you going to be alone forever? I'm not saying that, but I am laser focused on the ones who are starting off strong.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. I was just listening to every word of that. And so it kind of correlates to what you were saying before about how you pour into these young ladies, right?
Yeah.
And we talked about, also touched on that as well, like kind of the genesis of this. And
Mm,
so my question is, we touched on the genesis of this and maybe where this erosion towards relationships in this family dynamic maybe kind of started breaking down. But you're out here receiving questions and these inquiries, and you're on podcasts and other shows like this. W- My question is, we know where it's been, we know where we are. Where do you see it going, or is it going to get worse before it gets better, or do you see it trending in a different direction to where maybe we are beginning to circle back to more of this family dynamic, more relationship friendly environment?
it's absolutely going to get worse before it gets better. And I have no pleasure in saying that. I remember asking Mr. President, because he's the one who told me to even start all of this stuff that I'm doing. He told me, you need to get that stuff that you do out there. These young girls don't know. And I was, what does that even mean? But I just had a conversation with him this week, and he was like, all right, babe, pull back. You've done enough. They're not going to learn. And I was like, yeah, he told me that. I have a select few that, like I said, I pour into, and I'll be here to answer questions and help, but he's making plans for me and I want to be available for him because he's the priority. But I said, well, what do we do now? And he was like, scorched earth, meteorite, dinosaurs. And I was like, okay, but that's just how he is. He's an
Right.
executive and he didn't pull any punches. But I do believe, and it saddens me to say this, I think over the next 10 years, we are going to see a lot of women, especially women in my generation, who thought they had all the time in the world, and it's not going to end well for them. Again, what's happening in Asia, a lot of women, unfortunately, are meeting an untimely end and being found
Mhm.
in a very detrimental state. And I'm not happy to think about that and to say that, but we've got some women that are so stubborn and they're going down with their fist in the air, and it's just not going to end well. And I tell my young ladies, I mean, they know, look at your mothers and your aunties and the women that were loud and proud. Would you trade places with them? More often not. And that's the group that not only wants to do something about it, but they can do something about it. And I'll say something that I've thought about a lot, but I've never said before. And the reason why I'm pulling back and really focusing on the younger women, not only because that's what I was told to do in the beginning. I was told, Maggie, 25 and under only. And I was like, no, it's okay. We can try. If I pour into, let's say, a 45-year-old woman who her hot girl summer turned into two hot girl decades, never married, no children, no real relationship skills. She's past her prime and the ship has sailed. If I tried to coach her to find a man like mine, she's not ready for what she thinks that she wants. She is going to be kicking and screaming along the way and require more hand holding than I or anybody really should give. She's taking a man who could have had a family and a legacy of his own just for herself. And that's not helping the collective. And I am really thinking about the community. And I thought about it one day. I'm like, okay, if I pour into a middle-aged woman and she gets the outcome that she wants, she's won. She goes off into the sunset and there's one. In my opinion, that's not enough to tip the scales. My man always told me, he's like, babe, we need good mothers. It's never been about just me standing on my podium and righting this ship. But if the 50-year-olds can teach the 40-year-olds, and the 40-year-olds can teach the 30-year-olds, and the 30-year-olds can teach the 20-year-olds, that's how we change. But if that gap in the middle is not doing their part, if they're all worried about what I want right now, and our young ones are basically having to fend for themselves, if I focus on a young mother who everybody in her family is telling her she's stupid for not using her degree and, don't trust that man and all that, but she really wants to be a wife and a mother, and that brings her joy. She is raising up future Maggies or future little ones. That's the only way that we can write this. It's so past the tipping point that the one-offs are not going to help us. And I do. I mean, in my old age, I think about that. When you think about older or ancient communities, and you think, whatever happened to those people? Whatever happened to that, society? That can really happen to us if we don't turn this thing around. It's that serious to me. Maybe not for other people, but it is for me.
Yeah, is a response to that kind of you supporting or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but based off of that, do you support and was this what do you call this age gap dating?
Has
Um,
someone reached out to me about that? I'm sorry,
okay.
finish your question.
Yeah, no, that what was it? Do you support age gap dating and the way that you describe, so you talk about women in a certain age group. And if there were men in this same age group who were single, who were marriage minded, who want to be providers and protectors, but the pool of women in like age groups are as the women that you described, it seems like you start to lean towards the other way in the other direction, meaning going younger. And now it turns into age gap dating, which is certainly another topic that trends a lot. So just kind of want
Yeah.
to get your feeling on that as well.
Yeah, someone reached out to me and sent me his book. I'm supposed to be reading it, but I was hoping for an audiobook because I like to listen while I do other things. I don't necessarily promote it, but I do support it, meaning I'm not telling women that this is what you need to do. What I would love is that um, you marry the man in your peer group in your early years and you build a life together. But I'm going to be very honest and I'm going to give you all another zinger from Mr. President. He told me a 40-year-old man doesn't want a 40-year-old woman. And I was like, oh my gosh, here we go. But it's true. Yeah, he shoots me straight all the time. But
Right.
women have to understand that, especially if you're coming into a relationship with kids, you've already had your first, you've already had that experience. Allow the man to have the same. Now, um, so if a man, there's two options. Growing up in a small town, my parents married right out of college. I married right out of college. So that's my experience. But my ex-husband is 7 years older than me. So what I have seen more of is we pair up in our peer group, young, and we build together. That's how it was for a long time. Now people are taking time to build businesses, travel the world, go back to school, do all those things. I think you can do all of that while you're married, in my opinion. But um, ladies have to understand that if you take the time to do whatever you want to do, it hurts you in a couple ways. One, you will miss that fertility window. Now, look, if you don't want to have children, none of this applies anyway. But a man's life is already hard. He's not going to choose the hard path on purpose. So if a man waits till 40 to build himself to say, okay, now I'm ready to take a wife as my own, to have children, to be able to provide for them, it takes men a lot of time. And so they're going to want the biggest bang for their buck. Let's tell the truth. And so if a man wants a wife and a family, he's going to want the wife that can give him that family more easily. Why would he choose somebody that either is already coming with someone else's kids, or you're going to need bed rest, you're going to need all these tests, you're going to need all of that. That's what men think of. And if women get offended by that, I'm sorry. Find the man that doesn't want a family. There are men out there that maybe second time around, they just want to sail off into the sunset. That needs to be your dating pool. But if you're a 35, 36, 37-year-old woman thinking you're going to get a 35, 36, 37-year-old well-to-do man, it's not going to happen.
Right.
It makes sense for him to choose a younger woman.
Sure. I think so last question for me,
Okay.
and this has been great,
Thank you.
is the type of woman that you've talked about. If I were to kind of put it in a category, I immediately think of feminism, and we
Mm.
haven't used that term
Yeah.
during this conversation. But is that fair? Are you describing those that women that akin to kind of more feminine feminism and kind of driving that ideology, or is there something that I'm missing?
Yes, but it is feminism. And I think one of the clips that's going viral, I was on this podcast, Feminist versus Anti-Feminist. I'm not shouting from the rooftops and saying down with feminism. I really do not care what other people do. I just care about the effects that it has on us and in our community. I think a lot of women, and this is why it makes me sad, a lot of women have gotten swept up in it. I'm not going to say they're innocent, but unintentionally. I don't think most of us go out into the world saying, um, you know, men are stupid, and I can do, I'm just as strong as a man, and all of the things that I guess the new feminists, they don't want to be equal to men. They actually want to dominate men. Now, I will give credit where credit is due. There was an initial movement of feminism where they wanted women to be able to vote and own bank accounts and do all of that. That's all well and good. But we've moved past that, and it was somebody else's movement that has infected our community. And I think the biggest lie that our women have been living out is you've got time. I hear that one a lot. No rush, you've got time. Live first. There's no reason to rush. So, yes, that has tentacles into feminism, but I don't think we were having, as you would say, like a political movement. We just thought we could do masculine things, be in masculine spaces, and it wouldn't affect us. And so I think a lot of women are having their eyes open. And that's what I mean when I say it's going to get worse before it gets better, because a lot of women are now realizing that they didn't have time. That time has passed. I mean, we see it all over. I mean, these single meetups and, churches now are full of women and the men aren't approaching. All of those things that are the side effects of, well, I was interested, but you didn't want me, or you didn't really want to build anything. Now I did it on my own. Why should I, include you? These are all the side effects of it. So yes, it is feminism, but maybe unintentionally so. However, the outcome is still the same.
Wow. I appreciate that. Thank you,
Welcome.
Maggie.
You're welcome.
Listen, the moment we got you on the podcast, the overall IQ of all of us kind of raised. So I do appreciate appreciate having you on for that alone. Thank you, Maggie, for joining the J&K show. Listen, you
Okay.
have an open invitation anytime you want. Please return. We would be absolutely delighted to continue the conversation.
Thanks for watching the J&K Show.